All right, so here's part 4 of the series, New World Order. And kind of wanted to take it in a different direction, but still stay on the same vein, pertaining to the merchant class, the evolution of its power, and then we'll be heading towards its inevitable surface to rulership. All right. So the question I'm posing here in this part 4 is, was the Yeshua, the Christ, was he in fact killed because of his claiming to be God, or the Son of God, or was it something more diabolical? And one of the other recordings, I stated that Yeshua was an anarchist. We see, if you start at the beginning of time, you see that the controls were put in. There were various control factors such as religion, military, banking, and by banking, obviously in the biblical times or the Egyptian empires and all the, they may not have had banking in the from the conventional standpoint that we have it today, but money was always stored and used and exchanged, and obviously the king or the ruler would have the predominant lot of that money, or in that money system. So, and most times the ruler was the one that established the monetary system, whether it be gold or silver. All right. So, that being the case, that was, banks have always, in that sense, existed. And so, the banks would have been set up by the hierarchy, the rulership, and probably maintained and enforced by the nobility classes, the merchants that handled the king's trading and merchandising. All right, so if you can imagine, anytime that you go against the king and his monetary system, you probably wouldn't be in too great of standings with the king nor the nobility class. Definitely not with the king's officers and law enforcement. And here, all throughout time, you can see throughout even the historical scriptures that the influence of power stayed at the forefront of the issues. Kings had great riches, and they used war to attain more and more riches. They would, once they defeated the opponent, then they would spoil the opponent by removing the artifacts, the gold, the silver, and other relics that had value, and they would take it into their own camp. The winner would take it. It would spoil the enemy. All right, and so riches would grow through war. All right, and trickery, and usury, and debt. All right, extensions of credit from the king to the subjects, and then the subsequent collection of that debt upon due. And if you could not pay, then you were locked up. Okay, so that we see that that paradox all throughout history. All right, one is in rulership, is the creditor, and one is a subject, is the debtor to the king. And then you have the king's enforcers, all right, and the tax collectors and all that kind of deal. So Yeshua here, fast forwarding back to Yeshua, all right, he was an anarchist. All right. If you look throughout most of the New Testament, you'll see the conversations that Yeshua was having had a lot to do, and I would dare say predominantly had a lot to do with money, with finances, with taxes, with interest, with usury. He took a strong stand against the king at that time, being Caesar Augustus, and the upper echelon of the Roman Empire. Okay, he took a strong stand against them. Like I said in one of the other recordings, he even went as far as to go into the temple, which is where the bank was kept. This is where people would go and travel from around the rural areas to bring their taxes and their tithe and all that kind of thing to the temple. And that, it's evident through a later or discussion between, I think it was the Pharisees trying to trap Yeshua. They wanted to know what he had to say about paying tributes to the emperor. I think it was Caesar. And they tried to corner him, and they posed a question to him saying, "Is it lawful, O great teacher?" They were kind of taunting him in false recognition of who the people have claimed that he is, and his status throughout the community, that of some type of a leader or ruler. And so they wanted to see what he had to say in regards to Caesar's tributaries and tributes, his taxes, his tithes. Okay? And so the scripture says wisely, knowing basically where they're coming from and what their motive was, he said, "Bring me a coin." And so they brought him a coin, and he said to them, whose face is on that coin? All right. And then, of course, the story is they said Caesar, and then he said, "Well, render unto Caesar's that which is Caesar's, and render unto God's that which is God's." Okay. So, even in that, he was making a distinction between God and Caesar. A property debate, if you will. Whose is whose, and whose face is on that. So, I mean, if you look on the United States dollar, you can clearly see whose face is on that dollar. So, then that dollar belongs to whoever's face is on there, or the office. The Caesar was an office. Okay. And just like president is the office. So you have a face of a president on the dollar, the face of a president on the dollar, then that dollar belongs to that office, the president. Okay? And so there was the answer to the Pharisees, and they could not trick him or trap him. So he made a stance in more of what he did not say in that statement than actually what he did say in that statement. He wanted no part. In other words, he was an anarchist. I'm not ruled by that, is what he's saying. I mean, and those, whoever this is, then give it to Caesar. You're ruled by Caesar. And, so Yeshua, whipping the money changers out of the temple, telling them that you've made my father's house into a den of thieves because of your usury, your interest, your taxation, unjust enrichment. You're burdening the people. You're enslaving the people. You're bringing people to poverty. You're taking the hard-earned money that they worked hard for, and you're taking their cuts, your cut out of the top, and sending them home with basically nothing. Look at the value of the United States dollar to date. I believe there's somewheres of 97% value lost, okay, due to inflation, due to taxation, due to unjust enrichments, okay? And that's what Yeshua was completely against. As I stated, he was an anarchist. Remember, in the temple is where these exchanges were happening. This is where the people came to pay tithes. This is where the people came tithes. They paid tithes, a tenth. This is where the people were kind of where unjust enrichment happened. And people, you have the story of the woman that had the two, I think it was mites, and she gave her last, and Yeshua noticed that and brought that to the disciples, attention, saying that she's given more than everybody else here. Okay, more than likely because of her heart. Not because of the amount that she gave, but because of her heart. And that she, in thinking that she's doing the right thing, okay, just wanted to be obedient and had great faith, in doing what she did, And so it was the reason behind why she did it. It wasn't necessarily what she did or how she did it. Do you get what I mean? Okay. So, down through time, from the biblical historical record, we find multiple situations where Yeshua is using parables and examples that pertain very much to money. The parable of the talents. Remember this, where the leader gave each one of them in increment a certain denomination or amount, and then went away, and then when he came back, he examined each of the subjects to see what they had done with the amount of money that he had left them with. And, as the story goes on, he gets down to the last guy, and that says that he buried the talent for fear that someone might take it, and hoping just to give back the exact amount that he gave, or he was given. And how the story goes on that the leader called him a wicked and unprofitable servant, because he did not expand it. He did not grow it. He was not thrifty with it, as far as being wise and growing it. Okay, so he was a wicked and unprofitable. The other two had grown their grown interest on that amount that was given to them. And so you also have the Lazarus and the rich man. You even have the story of, I think it was Ananias and Sapphira. Ananias and Sapphires. The spell checker can't understand what I'm trying to say, so I had to say it again. But basically what happened there is, they were questioned as to how much they had sold a plot of land for, and they lied about how much they had sold it for. And, they had subsequently dropped dead for lying about, the amount. They didn't even have to. It was their own land. It was their money. But the fact that they chose to lie about it caused them to be judged on the spot. There's another. The rich man that approached Yeshua, I believe it was, saying that he had kept all the commandments since he was born. He had done all things right, and even Yeshua, seconded his notion and said, "Yeah, what you're saying is right. You have." He said, "But there's one thing. Go and sell all that you have." Okay, and the poor man, the rich man, actually walked away. It said sorrowful because he had great riches. Okay, so just another example there, and this is all through Zacchaeus, the tax collector. How he was, Yeshua said, "Come down from the tree. We're going to go to your house for dinner." And the people marveled that he would have anything to do with a tax collector because they were known as not very honorable men, as we talked about. He was in that merchant class, that participated in usury and extra interest and things like that to subvert the people. And so all throughout the New Testament, you'll find these different stories and parables pertaining to money. And so the question again, I know I went all the way around full circle, but the question again I pose to you is, was Yeshua killed because of his stance or a stance of making himself a god? Or was this more of an excuse and a cover-up for the real reason? And I contend that because of the fact that he stood against the economics, the usury, the unjust enrichment by the hierarchy, the nobility class, the tax collector, the merchant class, did he stand against them? And was his doctrine teaching against them? Okay, and did his ultimate demise come about similarly to Andrew Jackson, speaking against the bankers? All right, even going as far as calling the bankers in one of his speeches or quotes a den of thieves. Did Yeshua speak against the merchant class, the nobility, the hierarchy, and the tax collectors, and foil their plans or attempt to expose who they really are throughout biblical times, and therefore met his untimely demise, just as John F. Kennedy speaking against the bankers? So up to you. But that is part 4, and we'll continue with part 5. Stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in.